it's like a streaming type thing.
Okay, so the frontal lobe, which is at the front of the brain, you can see it's the biggest lobe, and it's the one that really separates us from like all other animals because we have the ability to like judge and plan and make decisions. But it also has a lot to do with our personality, which you could just boil it down to like abstract thought and emotional control. But that's your personality. Your emotional control and how you think, that's what makes your personality your personality. So, and we know it's personality because of this guy, Phineas Gage. Handsome fellow. Well, I mean, like half. He's not half bad. Okay, yeah. Phineas Gage, he was a railroad worker in the 1800s. Oh my God, I'll tell the story. And he was like working on the railroad, and there was like a big metal spike, and he was like hammering it into the ground. Unfortunately, someone earlier had spilled a little gunpowder in the place where he was hammering it into, and so when the metal rod hit the gunpowder and caused it to spark, it basically shot up the ouch. He shot up the pole through his frontal lobe. He survived. Like, that is a picture after the incident.
It doesn't even look that bad.
It doesn't even look that bad after the fact, after they like reconstructed his face, but he lost an eye and he lost a huge chunk of his frontal lobe, which is his personality. So his personality completely altered. Like, before the incident, he was a really nice guy and everyone liked him. After the incident, he was mean, he was a liar, he was like a cheater and he would steal. And people did not like him. Like, he lost all of his friends along with his eye because his personality completely changed. In fact, there's been several like Grey's Anatomy episodes where they have like someone that was like, well, this person used to be a nice guy and now he's not, or whatever, and then they do a brain scan. They're like, oh, it's right in the frontal lobe, the tumor. I knew it. I'm like, okay. So yes, frontal lobe, personality, Phineas Gage, and how I remember that Phineas Gage, the whole of his head is like gauges. Do people still do that with their ears and like with skateboards? Yeah. Okay. Like gauges. He had a gauge like right around there. So he had a gauge up his head. It used to be really prevalent. Like back when I first started teaching, everyone had gauges. But now not so much anymore. Maybe just a few people. So keep on rocking on, you kiddos. So the next thing that's in the frontal lobe, if I can get my thing to work, here we go. Hand on your head again, but this time rotate. Wait, hold on. Hey, Kenna. Oh, which one? Oh, the vocab quiz from yesterday. Okay, old. Hot. And we're back. Hey.
Wait.
So, not only is the personality and making judgment calls and things like that, but also this Broca's area, which we talked about on the very first day of school, when I was like, would you rather have damage to this or damage to that? Broca's area was one of them. So if you put your right hand on your head, and then rotate your hand to where only like your fingertips are touching, like that one little spot where your fingertips are touching, notice how it's only on the left-hand side of your head. And that's exactly where Broca's area is. So you can't see Broca's area on this screen because he's facing this way. But if it was your paper per se, and this person is facing the other way, you can mark it right around here. So if this was on the left-hand side, it's not. But if it were on the left-hand side, it would be right around here. Broca's area is only on the left-hand side. So about a quarter-sized spot on the left-hand side of the frontal lobe. What? It's a beautiful circle. What does Broca sound like in Spanish? Boca, which means what? It means mouth. And so this is the ability to speak using our mouth. Like be able to move your mouth to form speech. People with Broca's area damage, they can still like make noises, but they can't speak. Can't move. I mean, they can still eat and things like that, but they cannot use their mouth to form speech. So the guy who, I guess you could say, discovered Broca's area, his name is Paul Broca. He's a doctor, and he had a patient who couldn't speak, or he could only say one word. He could only say can. Tan. So they named him Tan. Kind of mean. It's very like Hodor kind of thing. But Tan. And he can only say that.
Don't talk about Hodor like that.
You don't know. You don't know him like we do.
You don't know his backstory.
Yeah, that's great. That's all.
Hold the door! Hold the door!
Yeah. GOT, not GTA.
Just hold the door.
Yeah, wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so when Tan died, they're like, hey, Paul Broca was like, I'm a doctor. I bet you there's something wrong with his brain. And I bet you whatever's wrong with his brain had to do with his speech. And so they did an autopsy on Tan and found out there was one damage to the brain. It was on the left-hand side of his frontal lobe. And so instead of nice Paul Broca, instead of naming it like after the guy and like it's Tan spot or something, he named it after himself. He's all like, me. So yeah, it's Broca's area. He named it after himself and not necessarily the patient, which, whatever. So if you have something wrong with that spot of your head, it's Broca's aphasia. And the term aphasia means impaired use of language. So that Tan guy, he had Broca's aphasia. So impaired use of language due to his Broca's area. Aphasia. Also, in your frontal lobe is another spot. So, if you take your hand, it doesn't matter which one, put it on your frontal lobe again, boop, and this time rotate back to where only it's like a headband that goes across your head, like this whole space. That right there is the motor cortex. So if you were shading it in on your brain, it would be like this last wrinkle that goes all the way across like a headband. And that is the motor cortex. Motor cortex deals with movement. This allows you to move your body. But we have this thing called, and it goes with like motor cortex, but it also goes along with everything else we've been talking about. I just don't really know when to say it, so I'm saying it now. This concept called contralateral control. Contralateral control. Contralateral control. And contralateral control means that your left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. So, if you were to open up a brain and stimulate the motor cortex on, let's say, the right-hand side, their left arms and legs would move. If you stimulate it on the left-hand side, their right arms and legs would move. I think there was a commercial, I don't know, a few years back. I think it was like a Travelocity or, I don't know, some commercial where it's like, book cheap hotels and whatever. And the commercial is a guy that's a surgeon, and he's doing brain surgery, and he's like, I don't have time to do brain surgery and search for cheap flights. And so he's like, with his brain surgeon utensils, is poking around in the guy's head that he's doing brain surgery on, and he's like on the bed, like on a computer, laptop, just like doing this, trying to search for cheap flights. But that's not like necessarily inaccurate either. I mean, you're not going to be poking with like a scalpel. But so here's the brain just looking this way, like that. So you can kind of see this pink area. It goes all the way across. That's the motor cortex. And every part of the motor cortex is designated towards a particular body part. The more a body part can move, like your lips can move a lot, your tongue can move a lot, your fingers and thumb can move a lot, has a big section, a bigger section on the motor cortex. Things that don't move very much, like your knee and your ankle, that doesn't really have too much of a movement like your face does, they're going to have very little spots. So once again, if I were to like touch over here, and that spot's dealing with like their thumb would move, but their right thumb would move, because that's the left side of the brain. So these are the two guys that discovered it. So the motor cortex is all about movement. And that's the future of prosthetics. That is the goal. If someone loses their arms and legs, they can have a prosthetic that is directly linked to their motor cortex.
Whoa.
That way, if they think about moving their arm, they will move their arm. If they
What?
think about stepping, it will step for them. That is the goal, is somehow make the connection between the motor cortex and that prosthetic. Which I don't see why it wouldn't, because everything we do is either chemical or electricity. So I don't see why that's going to happen probably in our lifetime.
By thinking, do you mean like how we think about stepping?
Yeah.
Like, will they have to like actually?
Oh, they would probably have to train themselves at first to I mean, it's not going to be, I wake from surgery and it's all like, hey, how you doing? But it's going to be, with like physical therapy and things. And so, but at first it might be like, grab cup. But at later, you probably won't have to think about it. Because when we first start walking, the kids are like, yeah, so, whatever. Okay, so, right hand on your frontal lobe. Now let's have the next hand, your left hand, that go like right behind it. Okay. Do you feel that the pinky of your left hand is touching the thumb of your right? Do you feel that? But do you see that your pinky of your left hand is not on your right hand? It's on your left hand. That's because this. No? If you were touching your hand.
It's just that was a little.
It's not ultra deep.
Self-awareness.
Sure, no, not really. But there's another cortex that touches the motor cortex, but it is not in the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is done, we're over it, we've moved on. But this next thing, what's this back lobe? What's this back thing? No, parietal lobe. On the parietal lobe, it's a new cortex, but it touches the motor one. So like this hand and this hand touch each other, but they're different hands. So this lobe and this lobe touch each other, but their cortexes touch each other. So that is the sensory cortex. So that is like feeling. I open up your brain, I poke around. This time, instead of your body parts moving, you'll feel of someone touching you. It'll feel like someone touching you. And again, contralateral control. I touch your left sensory cortex, you're going to feel like someone's touching your right arm. I touch your right sensory cortex, you're going to feel like someone's touching your left arm. And
So is that related to the sense of not like the ghost feelings found with
prosthetics?
Yeah.
So like you lose your leg, but you can still feel it there. Because your sensory cortex dedicated toward that leg, it's still there. Like,
What?
Unless you lose your leg and that part of your brain. It's like, how can you still feel something that's not there? Because the part responsible for feeling it is still there.
So you think you're feeling it?
Yeah.
Well, you are feeling it.
You are feeling it.
Because
your brain of feeling is still there.
Oh my gosh. A feeling
You
is
can't feel it if it's.
a feeling is a signal in your brain, so no matter what.
Right.
So you can cut off my entire lower half of my body and still feel it.
You should do that.
It's $500 long.
You gotta do.
Go ahead, put my lips on.
Speaking of lips,
Yeah.
notice how there's lots of feeling there. And because it's like big, so not only can we move it a lot, we can feel it a lot, which is why we like kissing each other on the lips and not necessarily like on the knee, because there's not very many feelings on the knee. And notice you cannot move motor your genitals, but you can feel them. You shouldn't feel them. Like personal spot. Oh, like you have feelings. Okay. So we just transitioned to a different lobe. What lobe are we talking about? The parietal lobe. So let's talk more about the parietal lobe. Not only does it have the sensory cortex that we just talked about, but it also has math and all your science reasoning here. Your spatial reasoning, your math.
I don't have it.
No, everyone does. And have you heard of the idea of like, well, I'm a left brain person, I'm a right brain person?
Yeah.
Okay, typically you might have, if you're right, if you will say that you're right brain, that means like you're artsy and you like English and social studies. And if you are left brain, you're math and your science. You can like both, of course. But Does anyone see a problem with that idea, of the idea of left and right brain? Oh, I'm really good at math. I'm so left-brained. This is the parietal lobe. Right. It's on both sides.
Idiots.
It's on both sides. It's on both sides. It's not like, oh, I'm such an artsy person. No. If you're an artsy person, like, chances are you're right-handed, because 90% of people are right-handed, and that's controlled by the left side of your brain. And artsy people are supposed to be right-handed, or right-brained. So that's all wrong, all backwards. Everything you've like heard is wrong. We only use 10% of our brain. That's bull crap right there.
There's an entire good movie now that knows.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like you were using 100% of your brain at all times. That's like saying if I shoot you in the head 90% of the time, you'll be okay. Let's do an experiment and see how that works. Any volunteers?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, no. Like I can see, I can hear, I'm thinking. Like I'm using both of my hands. I can feel and move.
Maybe we could levitate if we use the.
Maybe we could.
If we do the ghost dance, we can't get shot.
Thank you, Matthew, for that excellent party fact.
Your husband would laugh at that.
We have a different sense of humor. I have
I feel like you're
Wow.
Just kidding. It's recorded.
Good.
Okay.
I'm gonna take a
Also,
video of this and show it to
it's
everyone.
already a video. There's lots of spots in our parietal lobes called association areas, which basically means they're parts of the brain that have a purpose. We just don't really know what it is yet, because we haven't mapped the whole brain.
So that's that percent we're not using. We haven't even mapped the whole shit.
We're using it. We
No,
If I don't know what it does, it doesn't do anything. No. That's like, I don't know how a plane works, so it doesn't fly. No, that's not how it works. But my favorite part of the brain just happens to be an association area, and this one we do know what it does, and it's called the angular gyrus. It's my favorite part of it.
What?
The angular gyrus. And when I say what it does, you're like, who cares? But then when you realize how often you use it and you take it for granted, you're like, oh, it's kind of cool. Angular gyrus allows us to read in our head, which doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But you can, like, you are turning something, like, look at this line. Just read this in your head. Okay. You turn something visual into something auditory that only you can hear. You can change the accent. You can't make it louder though. When you scream in your head, you're just changing the pitch. You're not changing the volume. No, you were just I have a thing.
You can't scream in your head.
You can't.
Oh, God.
Do it.
I never thought about this way.
Your brain has never thought about the thing that it does that it takes for granted, but now that you're thinking about it, you're realizing what it's doing.
I mean, really cool.
Okay, read it now.
I'm trying to scream in my head so hard. That's so weird.
You guys like in a break his brain and all of a sudden there's screams.
Like you could like make that into like Morgan Freeman's voice. And when it's in your head, it's the perfect Morgan Freeman's voice. But when you say it out loud, it ain't right.
Why can't I scream?
No one can.
No, I can't.
And like without the angular gyrus, would you have to read things out loud and then hear yourself reading them to be able to read?
What?
Like,
Repeat.
No, like this allows us to read in your head. If we had this, you couldn't read in your head. Would you have to read it out loud and then hear yourself read it for you to understand what it
You have
is?
to read it in your head before you read it.
No, but what's happening first? If you're reading out loud, is your voice as fast as your brain is reading, or is your brain like one word ahead?
Oh my gosh, dude.
So you are doing it,
So you couldn't
even when
read.
you're not doing it.
You couldn't read.
Yeah. Hey.
So I don't need it.
What if you never learned to talk and you're deaf? Would like your head?
Chill out.
If you never learned to talk and you're deaf, and you read out loud, does the voice inside your head have the deaf accent, or is it the voice you would have had if you were not deaf.
Wait.
Oh my
No,
god.
but how
What do you think in feelings?
No.
Yeah, you're probably thinking pictures.
I'm thinking
Scream.
No, okay,
Ask a deaf person.
ask a deaf person.
Not like it.
Hey!
Can you explain why you can't scream in your head?
Because there's no volume. How can you scream without volume?
But it's like
Race balls.
you're saying stuff, but you can't
You can change
change.
the volume of your voice, but the
Volume.
volume in your head has no voice, so you can't change the volume. If there's no sound, then there's no volume.
Just the word.
Like you can't even think about making yourself sound louder. Like
People that are watching this at like home, my focus is going on.
this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. You can't scream in your
What?
So if I'm thinking of a word, like the pumpkin pie, and I think of it, do I think of it in my voice? But if Eli just told me a brand new word, like Eli tell me some made up word. Falafel. So like when I think of that, wow, when I think of that, do I think of his voice or I think like my voice?
You tell us, you just thought of it.
Because every time I say something, I don't know, think of how you say stuff in your mind. And think of it's how you say it.
leave my brain alone, bro. I can't.
No,
I
think
can't
of
do
You can't.
We're talking about a new one!
Okipino.
Occipital. This one's
Still in the oh
no, new lobe, right?
It's a new
I
logo.
got that.
It's a
Stop
further back
screaming in
one.
your head.
It's in the back of the head, and now you know that you do have eyes at the back of your head because they're responsible for vision. If you were to get hit in the back of your head, you could go blind.
Oh, stars.
That's when you fall, and if you fall and you hit the back of your head, you see stars. It's because you literally can see back there stars.
So you like an eyeball and back in your brain?
Only if you're a mom or a teacher. But if you're anyone else, and by the way, you know the whole like idea of contralateral control, left controls the right.
Yeah.
But it's the same for your eyes, but not left eye, right eye. Left side of both eyes is seen by the right side of your brain.
What?
Right side of both eyes is seen by the left side of your brain, but upside down in reverse. And then they like change it, and then put it back together, and then you see
Hold
it.
on.
We're amazing.
We're like a World Brain Day where we just dedicate the entire day to like thanking our brains.
We should do that every day and wear a helmet all the time because it's really sensitive
And
stuff.
play football.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So like if you were to stare, like look at this E. So stare at the E. Anything to the left of the E is seen by the right side of your brain, the right side of your occipital lobe. And then everything that's on the right side of that is seen by the left side of your occipital lobe. Oh, and in your peripheral vision, you can't see color.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
I can see kids right here.
Because you know it's red, and so your brain automatically fills it in.
Oh my god.
But if a brand new kid walks in with red hair and you did not know,
Can we have a
it
kid
would look
walk
great.
in?
What we're gonna do when we talk about like eyes later, I'm gonna have like
New kids.
a marker. You do
Does
not
my
have
brain
to
just know what the color of the room is, so I
Yes.
can see what the colors are?
Yes.
But how do we
What did I do
know if
from
we
oh
don't
my
see
god.
Because
Close your eyes.
his hair looks different from his hair.
Okay, not on my desk. Open your eyes. Okay, stare straight ahead. I have a marker in my hand. Tell me when you can see the marker. Okay?
Okay, I can see
What color is it?
red.
No, it's well. Gray.
Wait, but like,
What about
You know, if you know already, your brain fills it in. It has to be a surprise.
okay,
Don't
tell me when you can see the pencil.
Fred.
Yeah.
What color is it? Look at Ali's head, okay? Tell me when you can see it.
Purple.
When do you see it?
Are you holding the
When you said pencil, I thought it was yellow.
I think
Now that's too far off.
We have talked about temporal.
So we're colorblind from like here.
Yes.
you lose yourself.
Miss Taylor, you said pencil, what color do you think of?
Yellow.
So if I had like, if I said I had a blue pencil, and I said what color is the pencil, would your brain fill it in as yellow?
If you're expecting yellow.
But there's so many colors nowadays.
Because colors are invented. No, like back in the day, we
yellow.
only had black and white. I mean, there's pictures of them. Okay, Okay.
Everybody can only see with their peripheral vision.
Temporal lobe. Put your hands by your temples.
Can we just stop?
I don't like it.
It's on both sides. It's on both sides. They're all on both sides.
They're all.
I mean, like frontal lobe goes on both sides. Temporal lobe is on both sides. Parietal lobe both sides. Occipital lobe both sides. But the temporal lobe is your hearing. It's by your ears and by your temples. But once again, contralateral control. Your left ear is heard by the right side of your brain. The right ear hears the left side. I said backwards. The left side.
Doesn't that make it take longer, like fractions of a second?
Fractions of a second. But if I were to hit you on the side of the head, you could go deaf in both ears. The ear that I hit because now it's structurally damaged, and then the temporal lobe that I hit because it controls the other ear.
Why? Why does their brain do that? That's dumb.
Boredom. What if I did this? Okay.
Balls like every day.
Oh,
First
please.
brain got twisted around.
In a second. So, where Nikki's area is also in this side. Once again, just like Broca's area, it's on the left side only. On the very first day of school, I asked, would you rather have damage to Broca or Wernicke? Do you remember what Wernicke did? Being able to hear speech, being able to understand speech would make sense because it's the temporal lobe which is hearing. So Broca is in your frontal lobe, and that's all about moving because your motor cortex is there. Wernicke is on the left-hand side of your temporal lobe, and it makes sense because that's where your ear is, and so this is understanding speech.
You have any more mind-blowing stuff?
Yeah, open. Oh, I forgot to tell you about like occipital and the whole idea of blind. Like, what do blind people see?
Nothing.
What does that mean? Not black. You close your eyes, you see black. But what does your elbow see? Is it black?
No.
It's nothing.
What do you
What is-
your elbow see?
What is your elbow? Like, you have your elbow. What does your elbow see? Is it black here? No, it's just nothing.
Nothing.
So if you ask someone.
So like blind people see nothing. They don't see black. You see black when you close your eyes. What does your elbow see?
What is nothing?
That's nothing.
What does nothing look like?
Nothing's happening.
Nothing.
What is
What does your elbow see? Right now, everyone focus all your energy seeing what your elbow sees. Nothing.
My elbow! The surgery didn't work. I can't see with my elbow.
I'll see with our elbows. Oh,
You cannot see with your elbow.
we can also.
But just because
That's
we
like a
can't see it,
magnifying
we
glass.
can't define it doesn't mean it's nothing.
Okay.
It's something.
Like,
Why
how do you
people-
explain color to
why
a
people
blind
are
person?
I always thought they saw black. How do you
No, they don't see black. They see nothing.
Well, how would they know what black looks like?
Well, I mean, like, they
Some
see
people
black.
have
But it just happens to be nothing.
No, they don't see black. They see nothing.
What about people?
But
What is
wouldn't it?
They say you see nothing.
Some people
But
really
that's
see.
So how do you explain nothingness to someone that knows like the somethingness?
What if you go? What if you go blind?
That's so that's
What
what
if you would already know black, like you would know what color it was, but you're blind.
So if you ask somebody who wasn't blind and they went blind, what do they say?
I don't know. Well, let me hit you in the back of the head and say. Okay. Hey, Ham. You know that you also see faces here? You can recognize faces. But there are some people that can't recognize faces. Like they see faces, but they can't recognize people. What?
So when
No,
you
it's not
recognize-
Wernicke's area. This is another association area that's in the temporal lobe, but it's dealing with, you don't need to know the name of the area. I don't know the name of the area. It's dealing with recognizing faces. If you cannot recognize faces, you have something called prosopagnosia, which is also called face blindness. Well, the guy that he wrote a whole bunch of books. He died a couple years ago. Oliver Sacks. He said he wrote a book about his condition. He wrote several, but one of them is called "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat." Saw a hat, on a chair. Thought it was his wife. Sat down and had a conversation with a hat. Yeah.
What are they blind or they
No,
just can't see face?
that was my.
He never let the hat have a word in. He just.
That was the textbook.
There wasn't one.
Okay, so word.
What?
That was our textbook. Was the man who mistook his wife for a hat.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
I've had difficulty
There's him.
recognizing faces
Oliver's
as long as I can remember.
How does he know
His
he's talking to
face
people right
may
now?
not be
Why?
familiar, but his
He's
books,
in his closet.
Herodotus has written 10 bestsellers about the way the mind works. One, Awakenings, became a movie. And Robin Williams' character is based on Dr. Sachs.
Oh, my glasses.
They're on your face.
Thank you.
Now Sachs is revealing his own brain disorder, an inability to recognize faces.
Facial recognition is an amazing achievement.
But for Sachs, every face looks pretty much like every other face. It's called face blindness, or prosopagnosia.
Can you describe what you're seeing, or maybe what you're not seeing? I see all the features, but it doesn't quite add up to a unique image.
For example, look at these famous faces, easily identifiable. Now look again. It's still the same eyes, nose, and mouth, but the face is much harder to recognize. Someone who is face blind sees the features, but can't place the face.
If you can't tell who is who, how do you respond? Sometimes I kiss or embrace strangers, thinking that I know them.
It's so bad that when Sachs wrote a book reminiscing about his favorite uncle, he used a picture of someone else.
When this was published, Uncle Tungsten's children wrote to me indignantly, and they said, "Are you mad? That is not our father, and it looks nothing like our father."
He fixed it in the paperback. Now he is able to recognize people if he has enough clues.
Is there anything familiar about this face to you? I feel it ought to be familiar, and I have a vague sense of familiarity. Whoever it is obviously imminent, very much at ease with poise and pose. Could it be Reagan? Well, how did you arrive at that? There was a feeling of extreme self-assurance.
Harvard researchers studying this disorder estimate 1 out of 50 people have
A
it.
lot.
With regard to face blindness, we can point to a particular area of the brain and say it comes from here. Right. And
Wow.
we can also stimulate that area, and the person will see face, will hallucinate faces.
The sufferers include the artist Chuck Close, who gained worldwide renown with his portraits of faces.
We have to prove to the people who we see that we care about them, even though we're not going to recognize their faces.
It's one reason he paints family, like his daughter Maggie and his wife Leslie.
There are millions of us, of my sort, around who require, if not help, some sort of understanding or some sort of tolerance.
And actually, my entire family has face blindness.
By going public, Oliver
How would
Sacks
she know?
hopes face blindness will be accepted, much like dyslexia. A little recognition for those who can't recognize. For CBS News, this is Dr. Sanjay Gupta, New York.
Okay, lights for me.
That is so weird.
Yeah.
150, that's really big.
1 out of 50. Yeah, like.
So
there's
somebody
some
at our
people
school
who-
is
Yeah.
face blind.
It's just, maybe they feel like I'm just bad with names. That's probably how they feel. Like, I'm really bad with names. I keep seeing same people, and it's like, oh, you were in my English class? Like, I sit next to you, like,
But can
every
you
day.
not recognize, like,
So is everyone like a stranger?
but that's only with faces.
How
It's not
old
like
are
you
you?
can
Well,
talk
if,
about-
like,
yeah.
I can recognize you, like, with a voice and things like that, but the guy that is married, if you had
How
a
did he talk to
group
him?
full of people,
Yeah,
That seems
that's
like
not, like,
That's just blind.
right. I don't know, but
A
how,
little more damage than each other's.
but yeah, and our brain cannot make up a face. So if you have a dream, and there are people in the dream that you're like, I don't know who that was, you've seen that person somewhere in your life. You cannot just make up a face. So sometimes if you have a dream and like their face is either you can't see it or it's like cloudy, it's like at the time while you're dreaming, your brain's going through all the faces. They're like, hold on, I got a face for you, wait a second. And then it doesn't like catch up and assign a face. You can't just make up a face. So whenever you see people in the hallway and you see their faces, your brain collects them.
So what about an artist when they draw and like they just come up with a person? They can't draw a new face. It's always somebody.
Yeah, it's probably something that they already.
Can it be combinations of like parts?
Yes,
Alright.
but they can't like make up a nose. Like if you try to think like make up a lip or a nose or something, you've seen that lip and nose somewhere.
But
Yeah.
try to think of a new color.
They can't.
Try to describe the color.
Blurple. What was that from? Like purple and blue together, it's blurple. And it's from a show or movie, and they're like, that's the thing. Let's go blow your mind. Whatever. I'll just put it up. Okay, so what happens to if our brain is damaged? It's not like a lizard's tail. It can't just regrow. But it can reorganize. I'll just say it really quickly. I can do this in 2 minutes. There's a little girl. She's like 4 or 5. She had so many seizures a day that she was going to die. Like she was hospitalized and was having seizures every few minutes. And it started when she was an infant, just a few months old, and then it got worse every day, and medicine couldn't take it, like couldn't heal. So they removed half her brain, because that's what the seizure was. Half her brain. It was a hemispherectomy. And like spinal fluid will fill up, so it's not going to be like it'll fill up. But she walked out of the hospital, even though she was like 7 or something when they finally did it. Even though half your brain controls the side of your body, the other half controls the other side. If she removes half of her brain, that means one lung should be paralyzed. That means her whole half body should be paralyzed. But her brain realized no one's breathing this lung. No one's moving this arm or this leg or that part of the intestines. And so the brain just decided to reorganize and to control the whole body. So even though half the body should be paralyzed,
But she didn't have dedicated brain.
it won't happen if you're like an adult. They only did it with a kid.
Wasn't there like a case where they just like,
Every time I had an arm.
and like she couldn't communicate?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so weird.
I'm glad I have a good brain. Mostly.
That you know of, or that it was that you know.
Most of it. I know some.
My brain thinks highly of itself.
Are you still recording?
I am, crap.